Hi everyone, it's Randy here. Today I want to tell you a story. And this story takes place in 2008, around the time of Halloween, October 31st. Or perhaps it was even on Halloween Day. Don't quite remember, but around that time. I remember it was Halloween and people were dressed up. Everyone was out to celebrate. The story takes place in Dublin, in Ireland. I happened to be in Dublin at that time for a 4-day period. I was backpacking across Europe, partially because I was doing an exchange at the Bucerius Law School in Hamburg, Germany. And I was in third year of law school. And on weekends, I was able to backpack across almost all of Europe. It was very convenient. Flights were cheap. We used Ryanair. Terrible, terrible service and terrible planes, but very cheap. I was able to get across Europe for 20 euros, 40 euros, just ridiculous prices. And obviously living in hostels. I was a poor student at the time, so didn't have a lot of money. I was living in hostels and traveling around. I had decided that for the Halloween weekend, I would go to Dublin. And it was my first time in Ireland and my first time in Dublin. Absolutely fascinating city. There's a lot of history. James Joyce was one of my favorite authors. He is Irish. There's a statue of him in Dublin. There's a lot of beer culture. Guinness is there's a factory in Dublin, or I guess it's a factory, a Guinness factory or a plant, manufacturing plant, and I think it's also a museum, perhaps part of it. So there's a certain drinking culture and beer culture. A lot of famous authors and media personalities and celebrities who have come from Dublin or from Ireland in general. So I was there for the Halloween weekend, and at the this was the start of the day when I wandered around the city a bit, just doing tourist activities. I do recall that there was one street I went down, and everyone told me not to go on this street because it's very dangerous. The neighbors said, "Don't go on that street. You're going to get shot." Apparently I had wandered into some very dangerous area in Dublin. I don't remember the name of the street, but everyone in the area warned me, don't go down that path. But I was young and brave and naive, and I decided I'm absolutely going to go down that street with my camera hanging from my neck. I don't think I would do something like that now. I'm certainly more cautious and conservative, but at the time I was feeling adventurous, so I went down this street, and there were these teenage boys on the street, and they had what looked like a bonfire. They had, this was a residential street, and they were burning things, and they said, "What are you doing here?" Or something to that effect, that you shouldn't be here. And they bullied and chased me away. And then I turned the corner and I saw a police officer who said to me gave me the same warning: "Don't go down that street. You're going to be shot." So I apparently went down the most dangerous street in Dublin and survived. So that was part of the morning, and then in the afternoon I went to museums and art galleries. Absolutely my favorite things to do when I travel: museums and art galleries. And then by late afternoon, I had wandered into Trinity College. So Trinity College is, I believe it's a university in Dublin. I don't think it's actually a college. I mean, in Canada, we make a distinction between universities and colleges. It's called Trinity College, but I would imagine it's a university in that it's for higher education as opposed to vocational types of studies. But I was at Trinity College, this beautiful, beautiful campus with old buildings, grand eating halls that reminded me, at least, if you've ever seen the Harry Potter movies, of those grand dining halls in the Harry Potter movies. Just gorgeous with what's the decorum, the oak wood, that grandiose presentation. So I remember there were these gorgeous interior rooms, and I snuck into a class. So this is something I used to do when I did my undergrad at McMaster, and to an extent, but not so much at law school. I would sneak into other people's lectures. So lectures I had not signed up for. I found this to be really stimulating to sneak into lectures. Probably that made me a big nerd. That I thought that was the most adventurous thing that I could do, is sneak into a lecture that I wasn't signed up for. And I loved it. I loved learning new things. I loved sneaking into lectures, and just sitting in the back, or sometimes even in the front, and listening to lectures and learning. Just absolutely loved doing that. I did that so many times throughout undergrad, where I was doing my own course load, but I would at night, or sometimes when I had spare time, go to other lectures and attend and pretend to be a student. And I learned so much from doing that. So in keeping with that tradition, I sneaked into a lecture at Trinity College, I think on art history, which I found to be really fascinating. And for an hour, I was a Trinity College student. At least it felt like it. I felt very integrated. And I think it was Halloween Day, because everyone was dressed up. I remember people had their costumes on, and they were dressed up. So there's a lot of festivities going on. So that's the background of the story as to what I was doing, where I was, and we approach evening. I'm still on campus. I'm wandering around Trinity College somewhat aimlessly, just enjoying the atmosphere, taking it all in, just enjoying this, pretending to be a student life. Felt pretty adventurous and proud of myself. And I see this very, very long lineup. I don't know what people were lining up for, but again, this was when I was young and adventurous, and I just lined up. I was like, whatever this is, I am also lining up for it. I'm not too sure what people are lining up for, but it seems to be very popular. Is it free food? Are they giving out movie tickets? I don't know, but there is a giant line, and I'm going to be part of this line. So I lined up. I honestly did not know what to expect, and I lined up for an hour just because other people were doing it, and it felt like a good idea at the time. And slowly, as I made my way up to the front of a lecture hall, I eventually asked, what it seemed like an obvious question, like, what is this? Right? I was almost embarrassed to ask, because everyone else knew what they were lining up for except for me. I was just doing it out of randomness, if you will. And they said, well, there's a lecture or a speech or presentation tonight from Patrick Stewart. Really? Patrick Stewart? You mean from Star Trek? Yeah, Patrick Stewart, Captain Picard from Star Trek. So growing up, I had always had a fascination and a great deal of respect for Captain Picard. I didn't know much about Patrick Stewart, the person. He's the actor who plays Captain Picard, but he is this bald captain in the Star Trek series, Star Trek: The Next Generation. There was a TV series that was very popular, and I remember watching a lot of it on TV as a kid. I remember watching it very often. he was one of my favorite, if not my favorite captain of all these Star Trek captains. There were many of them. There was Captain Kirk, and then there was another captain from Deep Space Nine, and then I think Captain Janeway from Voyager, the female captain, and then they did many spin-offs and rewrites and on and on. But Next Generation, that was in the 90s. I remember he was fantastic. I loved his ability to command the room. He was intelligent, philosophical, a bit arrogant, sure of himself, but also capable of compassion. A very interesting character. So I really liked the character, but I knew very little about Patrick Stewart, the man. So this was incredibly exciting that for some reason in 2008 on Halloween weekend, Patrick Stewart speaking at Trinity College. So this was quite a surprise. I had no idea what I was lining up for, but it was quite the treat and quite the surprise. Then something, and then it almost never happened. It almost didn't happen because I was lined up pretty late. As you can imagine, I had, people were lining up perhaps hours before me. And by the time I got to the door, and I was probably among 10 or 12 people who just got to the door of this lecture hall, and they were out of space. So they couldn't let me in. And that was disappointing because I was, when you're in line and you're almost there, but they just shut the door right before you can go in. I was literally among 10 or 12 people who were just at the cusp of making it. Everyone else behind me obviously couldn't make it. So I thought, hey, I'm going to miss Patrick Stewart. This is going to be a lost opportunity. But then a miracle happened. I thought this was a failed evening. A miracle happened. They were going to put 12 seats at the front of the lecture hall, and they only had about 12. And they told me to attend the lecture, you have to pay, I think, 10 euros to buy a member to the Trinity College Historic Society. There was a club, a student club that was organizing, I think it was Historic Society or something like that was organizing the event. And apologies if I'm not recollecting correctly the exact name of that student organization, but they were very nice. So I bought a membership, 10 euros to the Trinity College Historic Society, and as a result of being a member, I was allowed to attend the lecture. And they had put literally 12 seats in the front row, so I lucked out. I lucked out entirely because they were able to put the seats in the front. And even though I had attended the lecture, or not the lecture, but attended the line, quite late, I was able to, in essence, skip the line in front of all of these people who had been waiting for a lot longer than I had. So a little bit of serendipity there. So here I was, front row seats, and there's silence in the room. There's anticipation, and then he arrives, Patrick Stewart, the man himself, and he comes in this dramatic fashion. I remember him coming in a cape. It was like he was part of some Shakespearean performance, and he is a Shakespeare actor, so I'm not surprised. But he came in a cape, and he just this dramatic entrance, and you could tell that he was having fun and he was in command, and he walked up to the front of the room, standing ovation. People were very excited to see him, and there was a female interviewer who was conducting an interview of Patrick Stewart live to the audience that day. So he walked up, and they started talking about his career, about his choice to do Star Trek. I'm not going to talk about the entire lecture or entire interview, but I will tell you what I remember, the things that really stood out for me. I'll start with elements of his career decisions, and I want to talk about his childhood, what at least what he told us about his childhood, and some advice he gave about acting in general. So first of all, I guess a little interesting fact is that when he signed up to be Captain Picard for Star Trek, all of his friends and colleagues said, this is gonna fail. This is a show that's not gonna do very well. Take your money and run, right? Just make your money, get out of there. But obviously, it turned out to be an amazing success. So a little historic fact uh, that I didn't know, that everybody thought, at least his friends thought it was going to fail. But I think the more important thing was what he was disclosing with respect to his childhood, which I thought to be really fascinating. So he had a very difficult childhood. He grew up in an abusive family. His father was an alcoholic and a war veteran, and most likely had PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, from the war, from the Second World War. So when he was growing up, the family was abusive. His father would hit his mom, would physically abuse him and his siblings, would drink a lot, and just very troubled, abusive, toxic environment. So I had no idea that he had grown up in such a difficult environment. I think he grew up in a very middle class, lower class family. They certainly were not wealthy, and he would do local theater, and he would go on stage, and he would skip school to perform. And something he said that really struck me as being really a significant statement. What was he said that the stage was the only place where I felt safe. The stage was the only place where I felt safe. Right? What a powerful, interesting statement, that by being someone else, by being playing a role, being an actor, you could sort of suspend your own reality for a while, suspend all that toxicity in your own life. And I think a lot of us can relate to that. Having a safe space, because not everyone grows up in the perfect home environment. Right? Not everybody. A lot of people experience some level of abuse growing up. It is quite common. It's really unfortunate, but many people don't have the perfect childhood, and some people have very miserable childhoods. And to find a safe space, whether that's a forest or whether that's a particular community or a particular place, a building, for him it was the stage. It was acting. So he would skip school and acting, and where he felt he belonged. That for that hour, or just for that the length of that play, or whatever he was doing, he was safe. Very, very deep statement. I thought it certainly resonated with me. And then he talked about acting, and he gave some general advice about, or maybe not general advice. His advice is that there are pretenders, and then there are actors. The pretenders are people who will express the emotions and the behavior, but are not deeply expressing the character. Right? They're doing the motions. They're saying the things, and they're making the facial expressions, and they're projecting a certain intonation, but they're not. It's not coming from within. They're just behavioral acting, if you will. They're just doing the behaviors, the motions. But he said true actors. They're not the pretenders. He called them pretenders. The true actors, you have to really express that part of yourself that has in some way experienced what the character is attempting to convey to the audience. Like, you have to look deeply inside yourself for some element of that to display in its most genuine form. And he talked a lot about being genuine in its most genuine form, and that the true great actors, they have to go deep into themselves. That if you're playing a character, and he gives this example where this is very difficult. He gives an example of playing a character from Shakespeare's Macbeth, and I think he was talking about Macbeth in particular. And Macbeth has these lines about violence and blood and murder and revenge, and to be able to play Macbeth properly, you have to express and reach into that, deep inside you, that your own Macbeth, if you will, right? That version of yourself that has maybe had thoughts of violence or blood or revenge or murder, and that's why he said it was so difficult, because you have to reach into yourself for that version of yourself. All right, so you almost become Macbeth, right? Like, you're not pretending to be Macbeth; you are Macbeth, and that's what great actors do. You become Macbeth, right? You are Macbeth, and that was a very profound statement too, and I think that's what makes him such a great actor, in my opinion. Is he's able to be genuine and truly take on the character and reflect that character through his own personal life experience. And then there were some funny moments in the interview. At one point, the interviewer, who is a female interviewer, said to Patrick Stewart, obviously there's a lot of it's a known fact, I think she said, that you date young women, many of whom are several decades younger than you. So Patrick Stewart's sort of known for that, and he did this. He just like kind of sat back to this question and did a little pose and said to the interviewer, "Are you propositioning me?" he said something along those lines. "Are you propositioning me?" And the audience laughed, and it was such a funny moment. But he's known to be a lover, a romantic, even perhaps a bit of a womanizer. There was actually a girl I met in Canada. This was several years later after meeting Patrick Stewart, who said that she had been asked out by Patrick Stewart, and maybe they even went on a date. She said that Patrick Stewart didn't ask her out directly. He had asked one of his assistants. I guess when you're famous, you have assistants do these mundane things like asking girls out for you. And his assistant went up to her and said, "Patrick Stewart over there would like to invite you to dinner." And obviously she said yes. I'm not too sure if anything happened after between the two of them, but she had been invited to dinner by Patrick Stewart, and she was handpicked among many young women to be Patrick Stewart's companion for the evening. So I can verify through anecdotal evidence that it is true. He is a lover and perhaps a womanizer. I don't mean that in an impolite way, but I mean that partially in jest. But a romantic, someone who loves the company of women. There's nothing to say that he's done anything improper. So I don't mean that comment in any offensive way. He's there were some other questions from the audience after the main interview. There was someone in the audience who asked him about Africa and what his opinion was about Africa. I thought it was an interesting political question. And his response was that he had not seen most of Africa. Again, as of 2008, he said he had seen maybe North Africa a little bit, but he did not know much about not personal experience with the continent. There was a person who asked him about his love for cars, and Patrick Stewart said that in the past he had no interest in cars, but then he had become, I think in his words, a petrolhead or something along those lines. I think he used the word petrolhead, and now he drives some like very fancy sports car and is like obsessed with cars. So that's changed. there was a moment that Patrick Stewart talked about Whoopi Goldberg, and how in filming the Star Trek series, Whoopi Goldberg, I think, was one of the characters. Whoopi Goldberg is a comedian, a female comedian, and Patrick Stewart was very serious on set as Captain Picard, and at one point, Whoopi Goldberg tried to get him to have a bit more fun on set, and Patrick Stewart replied, "We're not here to have fun." It was very, very serious about it. But then he disclosed that Whoopi was the person that made him laugh more and have fun on set and just really enjoy the acting process. So he attributes Whoopi Goldberg for giving him that jolt of joy and of not taking himself so seriously. So that's what I remember. Those were the highlights of that interview. I think the interview was maybe an hour and a half. Afterwards, and since I'm talking about my day, this has nothing to do with Patrick Stewart, but afterwards he left, and there was a young lady who was sitting next to me. She was coincidentally dressed as a pirate because it was Halloween. So there's a young lady, and she said, we started talking, and she invited me to go to a club after for Halloween. It was a goth club. So this is where most people dress in black or have that type of goth makeup. This was, I guess, quite popular in Dublin at the time. And I thought that was really fascinating because inside the club, everyone was dressed as like their favorite fairy tale character, but a goth version. So there was like goth Cinderella, goth Snow White, goth everything. So take your favorite fairy tale character and make sort of a goth version of her. So that was fascinating to go to a goth club on Halloween because just the costumes were quite uniform. In fact, everything was very black and dark and exciting in that way. And then this lady offered me drugs, ecstasy, and I said that's I think that's the end of the night. I don't do drugs, so that's when I knew that was a good way to end the night. Say no to drugs and and go home to my hostel. So I think my night would have turned different if I had taken ecstasy. I've never taken ecstasy in my life. I am generally pretty firm on not taking substances. But yeah, I think my night or maybe my weekend would have turned out to be quite different if I had taken drugs. But yeah, she had, asked me to go out into the fire escape of outside the building. We were on the fire exit, and she said, "Hey, you should take this with me." It's like, that's okay. And I left. I left and I went home. So that was my night. I think that was overall that entire day reflecting on not just Patrick Stewart, which was obviously the highlight of the day, but the entire day from the morning where I was going down that dangerous street in Dublin to the museums and art galleries in the afternoon, to sneaking into a lecture at Trinity College, to surprisingly finding a lecture by Patrick Stewart, to going to a goth club at night with a random lady I had met at the interview, and being offered drugs. And it was honestly one of the most interesting, most fun, exotic, and stimulating days of my life. Looking back at this particular day, it's in the top 10, maybe even in the top 5, just in terms of just adventure and thinking that was a really cool, very varied, very diverse day of different experiences. I hope you enjoyed this video. Patrick Stewart recently came out with a biography, which you can find on Audible. I'm not here to promote any products, but you can find the audio version of it, and there's a book that he wrote. In the book, he talks about his early life as well. I think the book is called Making It So. Don't quote me on this, but he did come out with a book And a lot of what he said in that lecture is also reflected in this book. So if you're a Patrick Stewart fan, as I am, certainly check out some of his stuff. He's a fascinating actor, a fascinating gentleman. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to speaking to you again in the next one. Goodbye.